Hey everyone, and welcome to Talent Alchemy. And if you have been following the HR tech space, you know that skills is the word of the year, but few companies are doing it as deeply as TechWolf. They are the intelligence layer that maps what employees actually do by looking at the digital footprint across different systems and platforms. And with their skills intelligence, work intelligence, and API first ecosystem, they have carved out a niche space for them in the talent intelligence ecosystem. And with us today is Mathieu De Baets, a product lead at TechWolf. And Mathieu has a fascinating background, moving from head of strategy role into the heart of AI product development, the hackathon hero. He has been instrumental in making skills-based strategy a reality for global firms for TechWolf. Mathieu, welcome to Talent Alchemy.
Thank you so much, Rinky, and thank you for the lovely introduction. I know that we've been talking about this podcast for a long time, so it's great to see how it's ramping up, and to be a guest on your podcast now.
Absolutely. I'm so happy to have you here. And I just wanted to remind the audience that this is part of my Open Skill Ecosystem series, where I've been inviting some of our key partners to talk about their core capabilities, their roadmap, and how they overall integrate with success factors. So let's dive in. Mathieu, talking about TechWolf and your core capabilities, many companies are talking about skills intelligence only, but TechWolf, you often talk about work intelligence as well. So I just want to understand, how do you differentiate both concepts? And also, if you want to talk in general about your core capabilities and offering, that will help.
Yeah. Um, yeah, really good. So indeed, as TechWolf, we try to position ourselves as the foundational data layer for workforce transformation. And you mentioned my previous experience, which was head of strategy at, well, actually a fintech organization. So I had very little knowledge about HR, but what really attracted me to TechWolf was the positioning as the foundational data layer to then fuel and supercharge a platform like SAP SuccessFactors to achieve the outcomes that the customers are really after. And so within our foundational data layer for workforce transformation, we basically distinguish between three different products. On the one hand, we have skills intelligence. On the other hand, we have work intelligence. But then we also have a market intelligence layer, which fuels both of these products and that enhance our foundational data capabilities, so to say. Now, how does skill intelligence and work intelligence differ from one another? In skills intelligence, we basically try to map what skills an organization has today with their employees and what skills do they need within their roles in order to succeed in their business objectives. Within work intelligence, this is definitely something that popped up more and more in the last 12 months, I would say. And in work intelligence, what we are looking at is how work is evolving within an organization and how an organization can prepare their workforce for the future. Definitely a super relevant topic in today's AI transformation and the impact of AI on work. And that's basically how we distinguish between the two in order to fuel workforce transformation within a large enterprise.
I've been hearing work intelligence a lot. Customers are really looking forward to their skills-based transformation journey, but work intelligence is what coming up a lot, including the task intelligence. So reading the workforce around the whole workforce strategy. So it's good to know that you are ahead of the game and already have a product that can help some of these customers. I think one of the challenges that many customers face is the messy and outdated skills data. And Mathieu, I have worked with you with some of our customers. So would you describe, how would you describe TechWolf use AI to inform and validate skills?
That's a really good question, and actually core to what our proposition makes to what makes it unique. And so how we look at data is really, on the one hand, we have the typical HR data. So the data lives within SAP SuccessFactors, for example. So the typical HCM data on employees and on jobs. That's one data source that we look at. Another really important data source is the market data. So the market intelligence that I talked about. So we have about, well, more than 2 billion vacancies over the last 10 years that we can extract a lot of data from. So this is about job titles, job descriptions, requisitions, but also compensation, location data, etc. So there's a lot of data that we can extract from our market data lake and apply our market intelligence to it to really make our data more valuable to a customer. However, where we really make the difference is that we look at business data. And this is a really important distinguisher between TechWolf and other vendors within the ecosystem, because it enables us to really fuel our skill and work intelligence products to another level. What I mean by that is that we have existing integrations into platforms such as Jira, ServiceNow, Confluence. We can take into account Slack data, Microsoft Teams. We can look at Salesforce data for your sales population. We can look at published resource for your research, like your R&D department. And that is really where we believe that the most important information resides in order to build a very proper skill and task profile for any employee and any job within the organization. Because in essence, the work that an employee is doing within their day-to-day basis, realistically, that is just not captured and kept up to date in a job description. The work that an employee is doing is captured in the work that they're actually doing on a day-to-day basis, which is stored in these business data systems. And the reason that we can pull from those systems is what makes TechWolf really unique, and where we can have a really powerful skills and work intelligence product.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. And I think you are one of the a couple of those skills ecosystem providers who can do that, like collect those digital footprints from various systems that you mentioned and create a unique skills profile for employees. You have a skills validation bot that's sitting on Microsoft Teams. Would you like to talk a bit about that and how that can help with SuccessFactor or similar platform solutions?
Yeah. It's a really good question, and it's good that you bring this up, because in today's world with AI impacting work, one narrative that is getting a lot of attention is the human in the loop. And the reality with any data-driven product is garbage in is garbage out. And the reality is also that we see with a lot of customers that their input data is not always 100% accurate. Like I said, job descriptions are often not kept up to date at all times, which means that there's going to be a gap with the reality. The fact that we can pull data from these business data systems enables us to close that gap more and more. However, there's always going to be a small aspect where we don't capture a unique skill that an employee, for example, has, and that is important in the employee's career path and growth trajectory, for example. And so we have developed we call it a skill assistant, but it's really a white label skill assistant. So it can live in Microsoft Teams, it can live in Slack. We can do a BTP application within SAP SuccessFactors and enable it there, for example, as well. But in essence, what it will do is the skills that we infer, for example, for an individual employee within an organization, we would first propose that to the employee for validation purposes and give a very transparent explanation as to why are we suggesting that skill for you to add it to your profile. For example, over the last 3 months, we have seen this skill pop up in your resume. We have seen it pop up in a gig that you did. We have seen it pop up in some learnings that you completed, and you have done this particular project that was captured in Jira. And so that's where we extracted the skill from. We would present this skill to the employee for validation purposes. And within Microsoft Teams or within Slack, for example, when an employee validates that skill, it would go directly into SAP SuccessFactors through our integrations that we have built. We really believe that that human in the loop is really important in order to make any skills-based transformation successful. Because when you engage your employees in creating and validating their skill profile, they'll be much more engaged to also do something with their skill profile and achieve the objectives of the enterprise on a skills level.
That's an absolutely amazing feature. And most of the customers that I have talked to, they love it, especially the ability of this bot to work with Slack and something like Microsoft Teams. So let's talk a bit about success factors. I know you integrate with not just us, not just SAP, but a lot of other HR tech solutions. But while we talk about success factors and especially Talent Intelligence Hub, which is the core of our skills foundation, how does that integration works, and what are the data, or I would say processes, that can go between these two solutions?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, we are a bit the Switzerland, so to speak, in terms of the skills ecosystem, but we have a select number of key partners, of which SAP SuccessFactors is definitely one, where we heavily focus on deep integrations to make our mutual customers super successful. And SAP SuccessFactors is honestly it's a fantastic platform for a lot of things: for talent acquisition, for talent management, for performance, for workforce planning, for learning and development. There's a ton of use cases that a customer can unlock within SAP SuccessFactors, which is why we see the value of having such deep integrations with SuccessFactors and as a result, Talent Intelligence Hub. And so what we in essence have built is an integration with Talent Intelligence Hub that goes over three layers. On the one hand, you have attributes library, where like your attributes library is the single source of truth for skills within your organization. These are the skills that are of the utmost importance to any enterprise, that you want to keep under control, and when you want to report on those, you want to track those, and that lives within your attributes library. We, from a TechWolf point of view, we look at the employee skill profiles, the job skill profiles that we create for an organization, and we create a skills taxonomy. The skills taxonomy is in essence the equivalent of the attributes library. It's just a hierarchical structure of those skills. So we would map those skills to skill clusters and skill domains. And there's a direct synchronization between that skills taxonomy and the attributes library. So in essence, when you would ask us about like how does an organization keep their skills taxonomy or attributes library up to date, we offer governance functionalities in or the only front end that we have is a TechWolf console for power users, and that's where a customer can, for example, every quarter keep their skills taxonomy and attributes library up to date with like AI suggested skills to add or to remove to your skills taxonomy to basically make it an effortless experience and not having to go through very manual exercises that take a very long time.
Yeah.
So
And
that's
and the, yeah.
no,
No,
go
go
for it if you want to ask a follow-up question
Yeah,
on that.
no, I was going to mention that the TechWolf console is something that a lot of admins, like the HR admins or the power users, like you said, they use that. And maybe you were heading to this already. Sorry for jumping ahead, but I was going to ask, how frequently do you suggest customers to keep that skills taxonomy up to date? Like, do you provide a frequently service where you frequently update that taxonomy?
Yeah. So that's a really good question. And so in our console, like a different set of power users, in essence, on the one hand, it would be the HR like center of excellence, for example, who would like keep track of the skills taxonomy. Or AI would continuously suggest new skills to be added or removed to the skills taxonomy to make it an as like continuous and effortless experience. However, in practice, we do see that a center of excellence would typically like group these initiatives into like a quarterly exercise, for example, to make it a bit more like streamlined and like process based. And not having to do this on a daily or weekly basis because that's also not really relevant. You're not going to change the skills that you want to report on every week. However, obviously, when there's a big strategic project ongoing within the organization, there's a big AI enablement going on within the organization. It might be that at that time, irrespective of the quarterly process, you would want to add some AI skills to your skills taxonomy, and that is often, or that is obviously possible with the process and with the tooling that we provide.
Awesome. Let's talk about some customer success stories now. You have some great happy customers. What types of business problems do customers typically come to TechWolf with? And if you can share a story, how you help them in their skills-based transformation journey.
So in terms of the use cases, it's really everything spanning the full employee experience lifecycle, going from recruitment to upskilling to learning to internal mobility to performance to from onboarding even. So there's really a lot of use cases that we see across our entire customer base. And if you ask me about customer success stories, it's important to mention that besides our attributes library integration, we have also an integration into Growth Portfolio through our Microsoft Teams Skill Assistant, where employees continuously like add and keep their skill profile up to date, including skill proficiencies that we infer, and also on Job Profile Builder. So that basically enables a customer to have a full view on their skills data, both on the supply side and the demand side within SuccessFactors, and that unlocks quite a lot of use cases. So, for example, one customer success story is where a large technology provider leveraged TechWolf to create skill profiles for all the jobs within their organization and then identify the top 10 to 12 critical skills for every business unit. Now, from there, that data was then used to streamline hiring initiatives and recruiting initiatives. Now, what they saw is that with these critical skills and by having a standard of critical skills on every job, hiring became a lot more streamlined. And the results were actually pretty incredible because they saw that 30% of their hires over a 12-month period were suddenly internal because requirements for jobs became just so clear. And given that the skills data on employees was also available, the internal mobility and the intelligence within an HCM like SuccessFactors powered a lot of internal mobility moves.
Okay.
Besides that, that impact on an internal mobility point of view, it also had an impact on the recruiting point of view. Because what they saw is that with the skills data, they realized a 32% reduction in time to hire, for example, which is like a very valuable data point
Yeah,
because
that's a lot.
reduction in time to hire actually achieves a lot of business value in terms of like money.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Can you share any customer example where they had this aha moment? For example, that digital footprint we discussed, how you can collect skills data from various sources. When the organization get visibility into their workforce skills for the first time, maybe some hidden skills they didn't even know existed. Was there any of those aha moment for the organization?
Yeah, actually, like if you ask me about an aha moment, like one customer really comes to mind. And so they're in the pharmaceutical space and they basically missed a bit the boat on like COVID-19 vaccine development. And they basically came to TechWolf to understand how they could become more agile with their resource allocation. And from like the first moment, like in essence, if we look at a project timeline, we collect the data, like all the input data, and right away we can create skill profiles for employees and jobs. Obviously, there would be a lot of validation ongoing, the Microsoft Teams bot with a human in the loop. But from the start, just having that data available with all the suggested skills, it already gives a lot of insight to like an organization at like organizational level. And so what they noticed is actually that 25% of their employees had a significant skills mismatch with their job, which basically triggered at the CEO level an approval for a massive learning transformation. And so by just having that visibility into the data, even though it wasn't validated at the individual employee level, it wasn't needed to understand at the org level what was actually going wrong. And so this learning transformation has like yielded a lot of benefits for this organization at the moment.
That's an amazing story. Moving on, let's talk about your innovations and roadmap. I mean, TechWolf, you are constantly innovating. And you introduced the concept of work intelligence index recently. Let's talk about that. If you can share, what insights does that provide to customers and how work is evolving?
Yeah. Um, so work intelligence has been a big focus over the last, I would say, 6 months in our go-to-market vehicle. It was obviously lingering for quite some time internally when we were building the product. But with work intelligence and the public index that we released, that public index is just a sneak peek, basically, of what we can produce in terms of data with what we have. Public index is purely based on market data. So when a customer joins, there's a lot of other data points added to it to make it a lot more accurate. But with our market intelligence, there's already a lot that we can do. And if you ask about the data points, in essence, what work intelligence is about deep down in terms of the data points, it's mapping jobs to individual tasks. So really defining the work content of every role within an organization. On
Okay.
the other hand, it's also employees to tasks. So what tasks are employees actually performing and how does that align with what their job is describing? Like, is there a mismatch? And that's what we can get from the business data by looking at those sources and not just the theoretical job data sources.
Okay. So in the past, I would say job profiles used to be maintained by organization more in a paragraph format, like, there is a descriptions, but you are breaking it down to task and then have skills attached to the task and provide these insights. Yeah, I think that's
So
amazing. Yeah.
tasks are indeed linked to skills, and that's how the two products come together. And then there's just a lot of additional data points at the task level. For example, time per task, like how much time is spent per task on a weekly basis at the individual job level, at the individual employee level, but also the automation potential. And that's really where the power of work intelligence comes in. So every task is given an AI impact score. So there's like a HAS scale, a human agent scale from Stanford, I believe that we apply. And every task is then rated about, is it augmentable? Is it automatable by AI? And from
Okay.
there, we can really do a lot in terms of customer cases. And so one very specific example that we just did was, or actually two that make it very tangible. is with our task intelligence or with our work intelligence, we gave them the task level visibility into which work could be automated versus augmented. And so what we did for them or for this particular customer is we generated AI smart goals based on the actual tasks for 7,000 employees. And the reason why we did that is because this company had a company-wide mandate to drive AI readiness and to upskill their workforce. However, the challenge that they ran into was that generic AI training almost fell flat because it didn't tell employees exactly when and how to use AI in their specific daily work. By having this task intelligence at the individual employee level and by understanding how every task an employee is working on can be automated or augmented with AI, we were able to generate very specific development goals for every individual employee within your organization that was really tied to their day-to-day work.
Yeah.
And so this was very impactful within that organization.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, AI smart goals and the way you described the automation versus augmentation, I love it. I think a lot of customers would like that. What else? Work Intelligence Index is definitely a key innovation that you have introduced recently. What's upcoming in the roadmap?
So one thing that we are heavily focused on, and it's not going to be a surprise, is like agents. Every organization is building agents, is building A2A connections, is building MCP protocols, etc. So we are trying to navigate that as well. And what we in essence have put forward for our 2026 product strategy is that we want to embed our data in as many workflows as possible. That means workflows from HR stakeholders, but also from business stakeholders. As with our work intelligence product, we can actually solve a lot of business problems and business challenges as well as to, for example, this AI training use case that we just discussed. That's actually a business problem. The business needs the employees to upskill on AI to make a lot more impact within the organization. And by having that data and by embedding that data into the day-to-day workflows of like managers, of employees, of HRBPs, that is where we really try to make the difference this year. So it's workflows as one aspect of things. Another really important aspect, and that's very important for our SAP customer and prospect ecosystem, is job architecture capabilities. Up until a couple of months ago, we always assumed a customer has a job architecture. They might not be happy with it, but it will never block the customer to onboard on, for example, SuccessFactors and Job Profile Builder. However, the more and more we learn, we have noticed that customers sometimes see that as a blocker to actually onboard on a skills-based initiatives and on a skills-based transformation, and as a result, also on TIH and on TechWolf. And given that we have identified that blocker, we are heavily investing now in our job architecture capabilities, where we can support a customer to refine and refresh their job architecture, local or like org-wide, provide the necessary tooling and the intelligence also to continuously govern and like keep the job architecture up to date. Because, well, you know better than anyone else that a job architecture can go stale very, very quickly and out of date. And so that's a really important factor that we are focusing on.
Yeah. And the job architecture, especially the industry specific job architecture, that is very important for all these customers. And last few years, you know, I've seen a lot of customers, like you said, rightly struggle in creating their data because it's massive and it's a lot of manual work. And that was one of the reasons I've seen a lot of customers start with a pilot and gradually build their job architecture. But with AI and with those features like TechWolf and some of the other ecosystem providers are giving, you can actually build a job architecture in a few weeks. So that is amazing from what we have seen in the past to where
Yeah.
we are today. Yeah.
But you can build one in a couple of weeks, but the challenge is how do you make it land within your organization? Typically,
Yeah.
what we've seen is that a job architecture, a lot of different stakeholders are involved, and a lot of different stakeholders have also a very different and hard opinion on how it should look like. So the
Yes.
challenge isn't necessarily with AI to create a job architecture. That's the easy part. The
Yeah.
difficult part is how do
How to
you
make
efficiently make that land within your organization, and how do you make sure that the job architecture actually reflects the work that is happening within your organization? Plus, how do you keep it up to date at all times in the future? So another big transformation project is not needed in like the next 12 months.
Yes. And Matthew, you are not behind a screen just building the product. I have seen you engaged with customers on the ground frequently. what advice would you give to HR leaders who are just starting their journey towards workforce intelligence or to be a skills-based organization? Seeing some HR leaders often step back because it seems like a massive transformation journey. So, is there any specific advice you would like to give them?
Yeah, what we always say is start small. You don't need to run an enterprise-wide big transformation to get going with skills. The best customer cases and use cases that we have seen is where a customer takes a very local business unit, a region, a department, whatever it may be, and try to really be the best practice example for the organization and also learn from that. A key aspect to skills-based workforce transformation within a large enterprise is also change management. And change management isn't always easy, and you need to gradually learn in that. And what we've seen again with our best customers is that they start small and they learn how they can best take on the employees and the HRBPs and the managers along in that journey, because that's really what you need in order to make any skills-based transformation successful. Without the engagement of the people within the organization, it will not work. And so that's really important. So start small.
And my audience already know this. I say this often that start small but start now. That's the key
Yeah.
theme. You are a AI, product leader. You've been in this intelligence space for some time now. We are talking a lot about agents and agentic AI. Just in general, what's your point of view on, especially on the HR tech space, and how agentic AI will play a role if we
Yeah.
narrow it down to the talent intelligence and skills intelligence space?
If I just reflect on my own day-to-day work, it's becoming more and more easy to navigate your work from a single experience. So what we need to do as like both you as SAP SuccessFactors and us like TechWolf being is to try and build that front door experience for work for an employee within an organization. And that is going to be unlocked by agent to agent connections, MCPs. They're maybe a bit becoming outdated now, I see in the market. So that's also
Yes.
not something we're focusing on, but we're
Yeah.
focusing more on agent to agent. But that's really where I think agentic experiences is going to go to. Like there will be single touch points for an employee to do a lot of their day-to-day work, like enhanced with
Yeah. So it's not just another buzzword, agentic AI, it's actually happening and happening very fast. Thank you, Matthew. Thanks for your time. I know you are busy too, and the time zone difference, I'm really grateful you made this time and looking forward to our next discussion.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Rinky, and very glad to have done this podcast recording and looking forward to the next one.
Thanks, everyone. Stay curious, stay golden. Have a good one.